chug, 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 chug,
Hello everyone and welcome back to Wizard Staff. I'm your host Blake.
And I'm Guy.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We do drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're playing children's card games. Hopefully you're following back from our part 1 of our core set 2021 set review.
Woo!
We are also here with our friend Derek from part 1. Say hello, Derek.
Hello, Derek. Haha, sorry. Anyways, hi guys.
I love dad jokes.
If you want more of Derek's cheeky humor, make sure you go listen to that part 1 we just mentioned.
Shameless plug, you know?
Absolutely.
Okay. It'll just make more sense that way. So, we're talking about cards that go in the 99, the main deck of your commander decks. So, we're going to begin with both the good cards and the overhyped cards. And why are we doing this? Well, every spoiler season, there's over 250 cards that get revealed and are added to the EDH format. And recently, it's really easy to fall into the hype because of all the excitement that's built up. But we've noticed it's becoming a bit excessive. So we've decided to restructure our episodes in order to deal with that. So we're going to be distinguishing the air quotes good versus the air quotes overhyped cards. The overhyped cards are not inherently bad cards. They're just more narrow or too narrow for the general scope of EDH and probably won't see much play.
Or they'll see a lot of play now, but then, you know, you bought it and then after playing with it twice, you realize like, oh, this actually isn't as good as the card as I thought, so I'm just going to take it out now. So we're trying to save you money.
So some overhyped qualities are the fact that they're too narrow to fit into a reasonable number of decks, or they have really high CMCs, or there's just better effects on better cards. So without further ado, let's start on a positive note. Let's start talking about the good 99. We'll start off with white and go in Wooburg order. And we're going to start with Idol of Endurance. For 2 and a white, it's an artifact that says when it ETBs, exile all creature cards with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard until this card leaves the battlefield. And then an activated ability of 1 and a white, tap. Until end of turn, you may cast a creature spell among the cards you exiled with this card without paying its mana cost. So this is repeatable recursion in white. So many mono white decks are running really good creatures that are 3 CMC or less, like Aven Mindcensor and Drannith Magistrate, Grand Abolisher, and Recruiter of the Guards, etc., etc. There's a lot.
Most of your hate bears in general. Yeah, it's nice that the cards come back after exile too when Idol leaves the field. So you don't just lose those cards forever. Kind of like Endless Horizons, which is like a card similar where you play it and then you exile a number of planes from your deck, and then every turn you can like draw one of those planes to put into your hand. But when that leaves the field, then you don't have access to a number of planes. So if you, depending on how many you exile, you may have just lost 10 lands from your deck, and that's kind of rough. But this one puts those back into the graveyard, so that's good. That's really great.
I mean, yeah, I think it's really solid for like hate bears, but I also think that it's, you just have to remember that it costs like 5 mana to immediately use on top of whatever the card that you're recurring costs. So like, this card is definitely good for like grindy. I can see it in like Orzhov, Faxi decks, like maybe like Azorius, like artifact cheesy shenanigans. But I also think like it's you have to build around it a little bit in order for it to be like as effective as you guys are saying.
Yeah, I mean you're not playing this on curve because likely you don't have that big of a graveyard already built up. It would just kind of be a waste.
Yeah, and I also want to say, like, I feel like the closest thing to mono white recursion is Sun Titan. So that's why everyone freaking runs Sun Titan and it annoys me. And so maybe now they'll also run this card.
And it's retrievable. This card's retrievable with Sun Titan, so there's good synergy there.
I guess I'll just say one last thing is that I think if you put this in like Nethroi, if you get like a good like Hermit Druid mill, or just like you've been like pushing like cards into the grave throughout the game, this is a good way to have recursion, like easy access to a lot of your creatures. So
my favorite mechanic, dredge. So Derek, would you actually say this is a good card, or would you say this is overhyped?
I think it's a bit overhyped, but I do think that it's a good card. I just don't think that it's as splashable as like Path to Exile, Sword Splashers. Like obviously like staples that white will like almost always run, but I do see that like it has its place in like the 99 for decks that can utilize hate bears properly.
Yeah, I see this more as like a mono white, not staple, but if you're running a lot of hate bears, like if you're running a mono white deck with a lot of hate bears, like this card definitely kind of goes into there. But it's not, like you said, it's not like a card you would just splash in if you're running white. It's not like a Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares kind of thing.
Sure, I'm fine with that. Mono white needs as much help as they can get. That's fine.
Yep. Alright.
Yep.
And that is the only pseudo white good card that we're going to talk about. So let's move into blue. We got Teferi's Ageless Insight, 2 blue legendary enchantment. If you would draw a card except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. So it reminds me of Consecrated Sphinx, though enchantments are much more durable, and it's only the cards that you draw. So it's not saying when your opponents draw a card, you draw some cards. However, if you pair this with like Rhystic Study or Consecrated Sphinx, you'll just be drawing tons of cards, and you know that's what blue is good at. You know, gotta study.
And to clarify, if you have Consecrated Sphinx, normally you draw 2 cards. This will draw you 4, not 3, 4. And Rhystic Study, it will draw you 2 for activation instead of 1. This card is super sexy to me, personally, because I am a self-proclaimed slut for enchantments. I love enchantments so much. And this is most comparable to El Hammer's Archive and Thought Reflection, where you're basically doubling your card draw. The issue with the previous 2 cards is that like being like 7 mana, 5 mana is just too much, and this being at 4 mana really does make a difference. You can get this down relatively early, and this really synergizes with Guy, what you were saying, these draw engines. This just gets you that much more card draw. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Commander players are sluts for drawing cards.
Oh yes.
I love this.
Blue and card draw go hand in hand, you know, along with like blue and counter spells and blue and basically every other broken mechanic in the game. So I think that it's
not ramping.
A solid card.
Kind of. Well, I guess it depends.
I mean,
you got your
artifacts.
Yeah, you got your artifacts.
Can assist, you know, and then I'm sure that I think blue has the most interaction with artifacts of the color. But anyways, on this card, I think it's just very solid, very good card draw, and then yeah, synergizes well with its namesake. You know, you get to loot 1 each turn, and then instead of 1, it's 2.
Only other note that I'd like to say is just because we have mentioned Rhystic Study, fuck Therese Nelson. That's just the one thing that I have to add to the last of this.
Do you want to give some context?
Therese Nelson has been known to be a transphobe, so WotC has like ended their relationship with her and will no longer be commissioning artwork from them or using their artwork for like future cards.
All right, Derek, do you want to read this next card?
The next card is See the Truth. 1 blue, 1 colorless. Sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. If this spell was cast from anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards into your hand instead.
So in my mind, it's ideally 1 and a blue to basically draw 3 cards. Since we can't play Ancestral Recall, this is like the closest thing? Alright. In my mind, this goes into decks that reliably cast things from the top of your deck, like Elsha, or exile off the top of your library, then cast it, like Paco and Halden decks, or cast it from your graveyard, like Kess. That's where I really see this card being played in certain decks.
I mean, it also synergizes with just the fact that, you know, if you give it flashback, so you know, get that effect to go off and get the 3. So you got like Snapcaster Mage. I almost think of it as an auto-include in mono blue decks. I guess it just kind of depends on, like, you know, how much synergy you're running with, you know, being able to recast things. I know my Jace deck would probably want this, just because I do tend to, like, try and recast things from my graveyard quite often to just, like, get that good card draw.
Yeah, I'd say your mono blue Jace deck is fine. I would disagree with the whole entire mono blue running this. Not all mono blue decks are running the flashback, but it's still a pretty good card.
Yeah, I think you have to build around this card a little bit. Well, you don't have to build around the card, but like,
because otherwise it's painfully mediocre.
Yeah, it's definitely has a strong ceiling, but in terms of like advantage, it's okay. It's just one card sometimes, unless like your commander is like Aisha, like you said. And I mean, you can play stuff like Future Sight, which lets you play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, or like Magus of the Future, but it's not good enough to be built around, but it is solid, I think. But
next we got Ghostly Pilferer, 1 in a blue, creature, spirit, rogue. And as we all know, Blake has a hard-on for mentioning spirits when it comes to our core set reviews.
That was one time.
One time is just enough. 2/1.
Damn it.
Whenever it becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. And then free discard outlet. So discard a card, and then it can't be blocked this turn.
Yeah, so that first ability is basically Key to the City, which some decks run. It's somewhat decent card draw. That middle ability, though, that's what really has my attention, because it allows you to draw whenever your opponents cast their commander, for example. Like, and I don't know if you've ever played Commander, but people typically like to play their commander. So you'll be drawing cards. Or this also counts if you cast spells from your graveyard, which decks also want to do. Or from the top of your library, which decks also want to do. Or cast from exile, which decks also want to do. This actually covers quite a lot of things that it's like, okay, you can do your thing, but I'm going to draw cards. I like it. And that third ability on top of that is a free discard outlet, which is actually pretty good. Like, the more you play Commander, you realize how good that ability is. Just think to the more recent Commander like Rael, how good a free discard outlet is.
yeah, I think this card it's very flexible in what it does. I think in like more casual or just adaptive decks that are more responsive and like able to like respond to their pod, I guess, this card is like very flexible. It's card draw, it's a discard outlet, it's pretty it comes down early too, so like you can almost always get value off it if you want. My only fear is that like the opportunity cost is that it's not necessarily the best at what it can do. We all talk about like how like good blue is at like a lot of things. Card draw is something that blue doesn't really lack in necessarily. So if you put this in your deck, I think it's always solid, but if you want to go, I guess, more cutthroat, there are potentially like better cards than this as well. But I do think the discard outlet is very valuable, maybe more so than even the secondary draw ability.
Yeah, I think the CEDH communities want this more for that middle ability, just because they do tend to play those cards like Underworld Breach, Yawgmoth's Will, so they'll be getting pretty good value off of that middle ability. So unless if you're winning that turn, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. But yeah, that's a good point, Derek. Blue does have quite a lot of ways. I think every blue card that we've mentioned, kind of like the tie-in, is that, oh, it's going to be able to get you a lot of card draw. So what do you think, if you could only have one of these three that we just mentioned, which one would you pick?
I would say this card, because the other two are, the Ageless Insight is not a win more necessarily, but it's like you're already like drawing in that scenario and you're just digging deeper. I think this card is very good when you just play it on its own, and it doesn't need much support because you just draw cards. You just draw cards when it untaps if you want. You draw cards when other people play cards, and yeah, I think it's probably the best of the three that we talked about.
Blake, what do you think?
I agree with that assessment. I really want to say that each of these cards in blue really go in specific decks that can optimize them the most. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
I just want to throw in one last thing, that this is a Spirit Rogue, and then there's a red card that I cannot remember the name of, but it's 2 mana, and then it says that like when a rogue attacks, like you get to exile the top card of your opponent's library and play it if you have like less cards in your hand in them. So this card lets you discard cards so that it can be blocked and you get to attack, and then you also get the trigger for it. So I think Rogue. I'll look for the name real quick.
We're going to move into black, and I'm just going to read this next card. It's Peer into the Abyss. It is 4 and black for a sorcery that says target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life round up each time. So this is a 7 CMC sorcery, which is kind of a hard pill to swallow, but this card is wild, and I think this is actually playable and casual and really scales better as the game goes late because it's more cards per life loss.
I saw this and thought of it as more of an overhyped card because it is 7 CMC and it's a sorcery. The best case scenario I guess I could imagine is you pay 7 mana, you draw 30 to 40 cards, and you would only lose 1 life because maybe you're only at 2 life. So I do agree that, you know, it does kind of scale better in the later game. But if you have 7 mana, I don't know, I feel like there are better things to do in black that would just allow you to progress a little closer to winning the game.
I still feel like even in casual this is playable because like you're still probably ramping. Like you can probably cast this turn 5 and you've just drawn like 40 cards, and even if you've tapped out and you have to pass turn, you can then sculpt the perfect hand from that and really go for the win next turn. And in casual, that's pretty reasonable, I feel.
I think the 2 cards that come to mind that like I can compare this to are Ad Nauseam and Necropotence. I think this card, it's definitely more casual than the 2.
It's definitely not those 2 powerhouses.
Yeah, exactly. Like it costs 7 mana, which is like a hefty investment. And then even if you're drawing like half your library, it's not your complete library or like up to a certain point, because like for Ad Nauseam, there's combos basically that let you draw till, you know, you just have no more cards and you win with like Thassa's Oracle or Lab Maniac. Same thing with just other cards like Necropotence, where you get to choose exactly how many cards you want to sculpt for. Whereas I think it's an interesting card, but I don't think it's as good as those 2.
The art also I really enjoy because it reminds me of fractal geometry, which is like pretty trippy and cool.
I mean, the art is definitely cool. I will give you that, Blake.
All right, middle ground.
Derek, want to move into red? We got a lot of good red cards. I'm super excited for red.
Okay, so this one is called Conspicuous Snoop. So it's red, creature, goblin, rogue. You play with the top card of your library revealed. You may cast goblin spells from the top of your library, and as long as the top card of your library is a goblin card, Conspicuous Snoop has all activated abilities of that card, and it is a 2/2. Just wow.
Yeah, I've seen some infinite loops with this where you have this card, and you play like Bogart Harbinger, and then so that says when it enters the battlefield, you go search for a goblin, and you put that goblin on top of your library. So that's when you go find like Kiki Jiki, and then Conspicuous Snoop, your 1 copy on the field, has the ability from Kiki Jiki. So then you activate your Conspicuous Snoop to copy itself with Kiki Jiki's ability, because Conspicuous Snoop is not a legendary. So you do that, and you create a bunch of Conspicuous Snoops, because you're just able to infinitely repeat that because Kiki Chiki also has haste.
So what do you do with all these tapped Snoops, though, Guy?
So, okay. Then you still have Bogart Harbinger on the field, and you have one more conspicuous Snoop where you copy your Bogart Harbinger, and so then you find Mog Fanatic instead, and you'll put that on top of your library, which has sacrifice a Mog Fanatic, and it deals 1 damage to an opponent. And since you have like a million of these conspicuous Snoops, you just are then able to deal like infinite damage, quote unquote infinite damage, but you're able to do like a fuck ton of damage.
I think this just really elevates goblins as a tribe in Commander. This is a great combo card.
Yeah, I think this card is just really good. It goes in every single goblin deck that you would ever want to make. Support the tribe really well. It's just very solid. I'm glad that they made it because I think goblins is always one of the more interesting like mono red tribes, and then this lets it do what goblins do best, you know, just kind of all sorts of shenanigans.
It's definitely one of the more beloved tribes, right?
I would say so.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, goblins and dragons are like the two most played tribes in Red. And then, dragons are the iconic, and then I think goblins fall right under as like the secondary pseudo tribe. Alright, gonna move on to the next card, Fiery Emancipation, which is 3 red, red, red enchantment. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead.
Ooh, baby, it's triple.
It's triple. So, okay. Man, I love this card. At first I saw this and I was like, this is overhyped. But then I thought about it a lot more and I was like, oh my god, this is such a great card. It's similar to that Nyxbloom Ancient that we just got in Theros, except it's now going to be like triple damage, where that one was like triple your mana. But this is definitely versatile to go into just most red decks, since the effect is also asymmetrical, so it's not doing any damage to you. So if your opponent deals damage to you, it's not going to triple that damage, where there has been enchantments that have done that, where double damage, but then when it hits you, it does that as well. And I mean, it has a high CMC, but red has plenty of ritual effects, so I don't foresee that being a huge problem. But yeah, I love this card. And I mean, it's not just like any source. It is any source that deals damage. It doesn't also have to be specifically a red source, which is nice. So just any deck that's doing damage, like a pingers or like a burn deck, is probably going to want this card.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, this is like such a Timmy card, but I honestly love it. Like, it's amazing. Like, just dealing triple damage for 6 mana, like, who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah, it's great. So, we got like Nyxbloom Ancient and Theros Beyond Death. We now have this card in red. Can we expect a blue card that triples your draws, and a black card that triples your life loss, and a white card that triples the number of tokens or life gain you get in coming sets?
I think so. WotC tends to
they're probably going to make a cycle of this.
Yeah, WotC tends to do cycles kind of like this. So I don't know if, I mean, I wrote those effects as like the potentials. I don't know if those will be the effects that we get, but that's what it kind of seems like to me.
I'll take this next card. It is Terror of the Peaks for 3 red, red creature dragon, 5/4 with flying, obviously. Spells your opponents cast that target this card cost an additional 3 life to cast. Okay. But whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, this card deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So that last ability is the best part. It's basically Warstorm Surge on legs, which goes in a lot of different decks, like Omnath Locust of Rage, Ilhari the Raiseboar, Noran the Weary, Felden, etc., etc., etc. what I'm really interested in is, Guy, is this going into your OG Perforos deck and your new Perforos deck?
Oh, well, I don't have new Perforos, but I definitely see this as potential to go into that new Perforos deck. It's worth testing. So far, I mean, not conspicuous snoops, because that Perforos deck doesn't have enough Goblin synergy in it. And this is getting to one of those points where I am trying to be a little more specific, but this card is not meant to be like overhyped, just because Warstorm Surge, kind of like the obvious comparison, is a card that's still played in a lot of decks. Yeah, so, you know, me gushing about it for like it going into Perforos isn't necessarily like, you know, trying to like put it in as like the overhype. And it's also got that nice little pay 3 life extra if you want to target it. And that may not seem like, I mean, that's kind of like nothing in EDH, just because we already have such high totals.
I think it adds up though, because like, let's say you're running Mana Crypt, Shock Lands, Fetch Lands. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that life is definitely a resource, but chip damage adds up in ways you wouldn't expect. And then towards mid or late game, like if you've been chipped like multiple times, someone could just take you out if you're too much of a threat.
That is true.
Yeah, but for this card, I'm definitely excited, because like, I think that it can go into Dragon Tribal pretty decently, like Scion of the Ur Dragon, or even like Kalia. This card is also kind of a Timmy card, but I think it's higher power in that it gives these decks a little more reach. And like, I know personally, like with Kalia, sometimes like if you get a swing in, the problem isn't the initial swing, it's just being able to finish people off, multiple people in EDH, before people clap back and like kill you. So I think that this gives you the ability to kind of just deal damage to either like other creatures or to people. So, you know, player removal, creature removal, it could be both.
Yeah, I do like that you kind of had that flexibility, because I think similarly in Perforos, if there's other, I mean, I'm just thinking of Jesse and Fabian and, you know, that other kid that we play with, but like they'll like target specific creatures at me, and I don't have too many ways of like trying to like pinpoint damage. So this is a nice way of, when you have 7 tokens entering the battlefield at once and they're like 2/2s, that's 14 damage that you can then kind of like evenly distribute amongst some creatures that are like problematic that you might not be able to get rid of in red, in mono red specifically. So I like it. Also going to just slip in Chandra's Incinerator. I didn't want to like go too much into this because it was more of a overhype and very niche effect, but not niche effect, but it's similar where specific to it's good in Perforos, but it does also have that similar effect that helps target specific threats based on how much non-combat damage you do, and that is very easy to do in red, and that's also worth testing out in Perforos. So yeah, Terror, Emancipation, and Chandra's Incinerator, all cards that are worth running in my very famous Perforos deck.
Right. Well, you have fun playing in the red sandbox.
Thank you. Alright, let's move on to green.
I can read it. So, Garrick's Uprising, for 2 generic and 1 green, it's an enchantment. When Garrick's Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have trample. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card.
Huh. So it's kind of like Primal Rage plus Elemental Bond with upside, and for only 3 mana. That seems good. It goes in like a lot of decks like Omnath Locust of Rage and Titania Protector of Argoth and a bunch of others. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I love the conditional card draw. Gives them all trample.
It also synergizes with the earlier legendary that we were talking about, because the green commander that we were talking about in part 1 that you guys should check out, she does not give creatures trample, and this does. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's a good way of like trying to draw extra cards to like get her to then trigger off and create more 2/2 cats. So, pretty good.
Alright, I'll talk about this next card. I want to talk about it real fast, because I'm the one who added it to the list. Real quick, this is Llanowar Visionary. It is 2 and a green for a creature, elf, druid. It's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and it has an activated ability of tap, add a green to your mana pool. So they basically stapled Llanowar Elves and Elvish Visionary together. It's a very simple and elegant design that is well balanced given how good the two halves are, and I just thought it was worth talking about.
I just want to add to that actually, because I saw this card and recently I've been toying around with the idea of companion in Commander, even after the 3 mana to add to hand nerf. And then for stuff like Obosh or Garuda, which care about mana cost, this gives you additional options if you're playing like Jund. So if you do decide for whatever reason to have like a companion, like this is a odd mana costed creature that performs the same function and lets you just have like a little more redundancy when your deck is already like trying to fulfill a specific condition.
Good consistency. We like that. I hope that we see more cards like this, where they take 2 kind of like iconic cards and just like staple them together to kind of give players options of like what they want to play, and then you can have multiple cards, of in your deck just for that consistency and good value.
And to clarify, it's like not so much mana that like it's unplayable, but it's also not so little mana that it's like better than the originals. So I just wanted to quickly mention this card. I really like the design on this.
The way that I envision like your turns kind of playing out with Llanowar Visionary is turn 1, play Llanowar Elves. Turn 2, Elvish Visionary. And then turn 3, you play Llanowar Visionary. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Quick thing. But I feel like you guys might know because we all played this other card game. I'm going to take your silence as you guys don't know. But it definitely reminds me...
You gotta give me more hints than that, man. Come on.
Sorry. It really reminds me of like fusion monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where, you know, you have like Cursed Dragon,
okay.
and then like Gaia's Fierce Champion, and then you literally just like put the 2 together.
Sorry, I do play Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was not able to catch that ball that you tossed at me. I'm sorry.
Neither did I. Now I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah, it's literally just like fusion, stapling 2 cards together. So, yeah. But, okay, we'll move into multicolor, because that was really bad. Blake, take it away.
Alright, here we go, baby. We got Sanctum of All. It costs Wooburg. So, white, blue, black, red, and green. It is a legendary enchantment. Shrine. Booyah. Here we go. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. Okay, baby. Shrine Tribal. So, shrines, for those of you who don't know, are enchantments that give you an effect in proportion to how many total shrines you control. Like, the more shrines you have, the more advantage you'll get. But most of them are overcosted and weak as fuck. So, we did get 5 new shrines that came in this set, and it's sort of the same deal. They're kind of overcosted and bad. That being said, after seeing the response to this card, there's definitely a growing popularity of people wanting to return to Kamigawa.
Yeah, I feel like this is WotC's subtle way of saying, like, it's coming soon. Just because in certain sets where, you know, there's multiple planes, they kind of, like, hint at the future. Because, like, I think it was in either Modern Horizons or, like, Core Set 2021. You know, they had, like, the temples that reference Theros, which, you know, we returned to Theros very shortly afterwards. So I feel like Kamigawa could be a set we return to in the actual year 2021 or early 2022. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical just because the first Kamigawa set was just a huge financial disaster. Not many people bought it, and it wasn't the best play experience. So, fingers crossed, one day.
Yeah, I think you guys are right because you guys mentioned like the whole Nyx Bloom Ancient, Fiery Emancipation. Wizards is like seemingly following this pattern where they're gradually reintroducing like or introducing or reintroducing like things to the game so that they can like kind of hint at what future sets will hold. I do think that the shrines are overcosted, very mediocre, but in terms of like a fun deck, I think it's possible to piece something together. Enchantment matters, you know?
And again, if you kill me with Shrine Tribal, dude, I'm gonna buy you 2 beers.
I think this just kind of helps Blake's Wooburg, Ogi. I forget what the Dragon Spirit tribe thing is, but like you could then run this in it, and it's like a Spirit and a Shrine deck, kind of stapled into one. So that's gonna be our next deck tech video. So stay tuned for that.
God no.
All right, but we've talked about some of like the good cards in the 99, but now let's get into a little of those overhyped cards. Those cards that, you know, you see it and you're like, man, I need to play this. But we're going to try and warn you ahead of time of maybe these aren't actually cards that, you know, are worth running. And first off, we have Chromatic Orrery, which is 7 generic mana, legendary artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. You can tap it to add 5 colorless mana. So 5 colorless mana, tap, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. So this is a high-costed artifact that is probably only worth running in decks with 3 or more colors, maybe. And so why this is overhyped is because there are just better options for decks that need help fixing their mana colors. So you got like Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Chromatic Lantern, Joiner Adept, and Prismatic Omen. 5 mana to just draw maybe 5 cards doesn't seem too great to me. It would just be a little more helpful if the ability was like a Wooburg and no tap. So if you were able to like funnel a bunch of like Wooburg into it to draw 5 cards without the tap, I don't know. This card's just kind of like bleh to me. I don't anticipate people actually playing it that much.
I basically see it as a mana rock that costs way too much. It can also combo with like Filigree Sages, sure, but that's a really slow and clunky 2-card combo that shouldn't even be played in super casual pods. Even if you are able to ramp into this or cheat it into play ahead of curve, there's just so many better targets to do that too. It's like, it's not worth your time. I know it looks cool. It's just not worth your time. Don't think about it for even
Don't buy
more
it.
than like
I think the
30
thing with
seconds.
this though, that I'll defend it a little bit, is that this is kind of like the whole Llanowar Visionary situation, where if you compare Llanowar Visionary to like Llanowar Elves, like it's obviously higher costed, but I think one of the nice things about this is that it is flexible, and then it also does give you card draw at some point in the game. So I'm not saying that it's good in the sense that like if you want to like tune your deck, like you throw this in because it's a win condition. Like I think it's more that this deck, this card is solid, but like you said, it is overhyped.
And I want to quickly clarify, this is Commander. You can play whatever cards you want. If this card brings you joy and happiness, by all means, go ahead. Just don't get frustrated if you find yourself losing a bunch, is all I'm saying. That goes for all the cards we're going to talk about.
Yeah, okay, that is a good point. Okay, so yeah, sorry to say, like, don't buy this card, but, yeah, if you really want, and if you really like the art, like, if it just jams with you and it makes you happy, buy it in foil, put it in your deck. You know, it's your deck. We're just trying to give you some insight as to why we think it may not actually be as good as you think, but if you're like, nah, fuck you guys, you're drunk, you don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, that's kind of true half the
go
time.
go buy the card anyways. So, yeah. Alright, next card.
Alright, I can read this next card. It is Sublime Epiphany. It is 4 and blue instant. Choose one or more. Counter target spell, counter target activated ability or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and target player draws a card.
So the obvious comparison that I have to this is Cryptic Command, but Cryptic Command is just so much better. 6 mana for 5 abilities isn't bad, but it's just more like you're more likely to use 4 out of 5 of these at a time, unless if you stack it a little oddly. And I don't know, it just seems overcosted, and
it's very difficult to hold 6 mana open.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like you want this to be like a reactive thing, but if you're upholding 6 mana to maybe only actually get 1 or 2 of these things to go off, it doesn't seem worth it. I don't know. I guess it's like, it's nice that this card does exist if Cryptic Command is like too expensive for you. Like this is, I guess, a good budget version. So you could put this in your deck instead, maybe?
Even then, I would really encourage people to play like slightly suboptimal like 3 mana counter spells before they run this. 6 mana is so much mana. Fuck. Just no.
I mean, I feel like there's like the theme of like as a guy would say, fusing cards together, you know, with polymerization and all that. And I think that this card is an example of that. It's not the best at what it does, but there are going to be times where you have a lot of mana and you want to do all 5 of these things on the card. So it's just, I don't think it's good, but if you put it in your deck, I wouldn't fault you.
The art's cool.
There's better options.
Discontinuity. So for 3 generic and 3 blue, it's an instant that says, as long as it's your turn, this spell costs 2 mana, 2 generic, and 2 blue less to cast. So basically it turns into 1 generic mana and 1 colorless and 1 blue mana. And the effect is end the turn, which means you exile all spells and abilities on the stack, including this card, and the player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size. Damage wears off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end.
Okay, can I go off on this card?
Yeah, go for it, dude.
This effect is not strong in Commander. In a multiplayer format, you have to worry about 3 opponents, not just 1. And you're likely tapped out trying to stop one of your opponents with this card. And it's just too much mana. It's basically another time stop, which is a card that also ends the turn and sees almost no play because of the reasons I just gave. And if you think you're gonna use this to like defensively on your turn for like 2 mana to like stop someone's Cyclonic Rift on like your end step, even then that's not good. You want to run other types of like counter magic. It's even in the most niche. Okay, you can think of a bunch of niche scenarios, like you run Final Fortune, like gives you an extra turn, you die on the end step of that next turn, and you use this to like so you don't die. But even then, that's so niche and so specific. This is just not good. Please don't fall for the trap of that is this card. It looks cool, but it's just bad. Please don't play this card.
Yeah, I thought it looked cool because it's like a pseudo lightsaber, and it just kind of like puts lightsabers into Magic the Gathering. But I agree with Blake. There's better interactive Magic cards that you could be playing. So I don't see this as a card that you would want to use on the defense. It probably has its place in other formats.
But you could pay 6 mana to stop someone's turn. Duh. Like,
oh, get out of here.
We just talked about a card that costs 6 mana that does so much more things that, you know, Sublime Epiphany is actually a better way of like holding up the 6 mana than Discontinuity.
Yeah, it's very costly effect.
That's comparing trash to trash.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. People just, I see this card talked about a lot on like the EDH pages, and I just like swipe right over it. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to like read what you have to say.
Just play good cards instead.
Okay, next we got Miscast, which is blue, just a 1 blue. Instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3 generic mana. So it's a little conditional. It's actually very conditional, and it's not a hard counter. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like the greatest.
It's definite. Like the first thing I thought of when I saw this is just that Swan Song basically does like what this does, but better. Like it doesn't give the opponent an opportunity to like pay 3 and like nullify whatever they were trying to do. So just outclassed as a card, in my opinion.
Basically, it comes after every, like, air quotes, free counterspell, every 1 mana counterspell, and every 2 mana counterspell. And then it starts getting among the really, like, niche 1 and 2 mana counterspells that are, like, soft. And most of those are better than this card, so it's close. It's close, but it just doesn't quite make the cut. Like, okay, this is probably one of the cards on this overhyped list that is maybe okay to run if you can't afford those super expensive counterspells like Force of Will, Pact of Negation, Mana Drain. Okay, I will kind of understand if you play this card because there are a lot of people who play instants and sorceries and people like to tap out, so they can't always pay the 3 mana. So I am not often the person that comes to the defense of cards, but I will kind of come to the defense of this card in the specific case that someone is on a budget.
I would only say that you run this if you're doing like some counterspell tribal or something. Like it's not strong enough in our format, I don't think.
Like your Baral Chief of Compliance decks.
Well, not even that, because you can't get a discount off of it. It's not like...
Oh, you're right, yeah. So never mind then.
Yeah, fuck this card.
Yeah, don't listen to Blake, guys. This card is bad. There's cheaper cards. Swan Song is like hella cheap.
There's a nice new version with the really realistic looking swan on it.
Alright, the next card we have is Conclave Mentor. Real quick, it is green and a white for a creature, Centaur, Cleric. It's a 2/2. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters will be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. When Conclave Mentor dies, you gain life equal to its power. So this is basically Hardened Scales on legs. Hardened Scales is a pretty decent Modern and Pioneer deck, I believe, but it is not really relevant in EDH. This effect only really sees play in +1/+1 counter decks, which is a fairly niche archetype. And okay, yeah, it's a combo piece, specifically in Gave, Guru of Spores, or Marath commander decks, but that's like 2 out of over 1,000 commanders. This is just so niche and specific. I've seen people talking like, oh, this goes in every green deck, this goes in every white deck, oh, this goes in every Selesnya deck. No, shut the fuck up. Stop.
Yeah, I think this is just a good example of overhype.
Yeah, like it's not like it's a bad card, but it's not game breaking. Like there's nothing it does that card that existed before it didn't do. So.
I also want to rant about this next card, so I'm going to talk about this next card too. It is Unleash Fury. It is 1 and a red for an instant that says double the power of target creature until end of turn. Okay, so only in casual feather decks might this see play. It only goes in like a few decks with the specific game plan that is pump only 1 creature to be super huge, give it evasion, then one-shot your opponents 1 at a time. And even then, it's like there are so many better cards to put in like a Feather the Redeemed deck. And I was seeing people, oh, put this in Calamax and Zada, Elsha, Xenagos, every mono red deck. No, stop. No, don't do that. This is not that good of a card. And just don't do it, please. There are so many better cards to put in all of those decks that I just mentioned. Please don't do that. Be a good deck builder.
So what I'm hearing from you basically is that we put this card in Guy's Rada Ultron deck. Huh? And then there you go. Like you get to double the power and you have first strike. battle you.
I'm dying. No.
If you don't understand that joke, you have to go listen to part 1 of this podcast and then come back for part 2. And then you'll start laughing on the ground like a Rafflecopter.
I love this card. This card is great. So, this card is called 9 Lives, and then for 1 generic, or 1 colorless, 2 white, it's an enchantment, and it has hexproof. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, exile it. When 9 lives leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. Before Blake goes off, I just want to say, good art, and then, you know what? This card, it has potential. You know, you never know.
I will admit, this art is super cute. Like, the cat is just like the cutest smug bastard I've ever seen in my life. And I want him. But other than that, this card's shit. Okay, so, I love enchantments. But, okay, this is most comparable to cards like Phyrexian Unlife and Lich effects, which are not really good in Commander. The only exception being that Phyrexian Unlife is good in Selenia Dark Angel decks, which again, that is 1 commander out of over 1,000. It doesn't actually stop you from losing the game by going under 1 life, which is what makes those other cards like even mildly playable. This card doesn't do that. It only stops burn damage and combat damage, basically. It does nothing against life loss. It does nothing against non-targeted removal of enchantments. And it doesn't stop your opponent's alternate win conditions, like milling you out or playing a Laboratory Maniac, etc., etc., etc. Even if you stifle the trigger, the line of text that says when there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, exile it. Even if you stifle the trigger and end the turn with, say, discontinuity, it's a state-based action. So the game will check again immediately right after, before anyone gains priority, and you will still lose the game. And running this with Solemnity, because everyone talks about Solemnity when they talk about this card, to that I say, don't play 2 bad cards trying to make only one of them work.
The thing about this for me is just like, white has better cards that pretty much like say save you from like losing effects. So you got like Angel's Grace, Worship, Gideon of the Trials. So I feel like this card is, you know, acceptable to play in your Rin and Seri casual cat dog deck because it kind of like fits the theme. But otherwise, I don't really see it being that good. Because also, if I'm reading this correctly, if a source would deal damage to you, your opponent could like swing in with 3 creatures, and that's 3 different sources of damage, which then would put 3 counters on this. And then, you know, next opponent who could do 2 creatures, so that's 5. And then one opponent next that maybe they have 2 more, so you're up to 7 after 1 turn cycle, because they'll just be like, oh, this is an easy way for us to get him up to like 9 counters on this, and then he has to exile it, and he loses the game. So it doesn't really seem like it's actually going to save you from dying at all.
Correct. And like, the idea is like, oh, you just put this in a Pillow Fort deck, it's fine. No, run better cards still.
Yeah, I think this card it's too trolly. It's very casual, for sure. I guess, like, I was thinking that you could put it in Zedru, and then, like, play around the idea that, like, you can, like, shift control of it to someone else and then kill them, like, that turn, if it's at, like, 8 incarnation counters. But...
okay, I agree. But again, that's 1 commander out of over 1,000!
No, dude, I completely agree. I'm just messing around. Like, it's not a great card. Definitely better Lich effects, for sure.
Alright, next we're moving on to Elder Gargaroth? Whatever. Gargaroth.
Gargaroth, come on, guy. Are you, like, that drunk already?
3 beers is quite a lot for me. So, 3 green, creature, beast, 6/6, vigilance, reach, trample. Whenever it attacks or blocks, choose one of the following. create a 3/3 green beast creature token. You gain 3 life, or draw a card.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, this is really just like a 5 mana 6/6 beat stick that might draw you a few cards. And I don't feel like that is good enough in my opinion, even in casual. Guy, does this go in Galta?
Yeah, so I know you asked me that in the notes, and I was like, I think this is, this is a good example of like, the hyper-specific situation where this would be worth running in a Galta creature-only deck because you want creatures that are, 1, lower CMC to the power toughness, so check mark there. And then this also has some pretty good keywords, vigilance, reach, trample, so check mark there. And then whenever it attacks or blocks, because you can attack with it, and you're going to then also be able to use it to block because of the vigilance, you'll be able to get like 2 of these to go off, probably in a turn cycle if someone attacks you. So it definitely feels worth running in a Galta creature only deck, which is what I want to turn Galta into, just because creatures. But that's why this is like hyper specific. That's the only reason why. That's the only situation where I think this is good. Otherwise, I feel like this is not really worth your time in EDH.
Yeah, I think this is a powerful standard card, but for EDH, it's a little pricey for the cost, and I don't think that cards that rely on attack cycles when you only get 1 every 4 turns are that solid. Especially when the payoff is just 1 card or a 3/3 beast token, generally.
I mean, I guess the nice thing is, yeah, if you do attack and you have vigilance, and then if you do have each of your opponents attack into you, you could have this block, and assuming that this lives, obviously. So maybe you could get like 1 of each of these to go off. But now I'm just kind of creating like the ideal scenario for this card, which also just kind of speaks to the fact that like that's not.
Yeah, people wouldn't attack into you unless they get something from it. So I don't think a 3/3 beast token or a card would be like good enough for whatever they're about to do.
Overhyped. Next card. Well, actually, our last card. Derek will take it away.
Alright, this is a double vision for 3 colorless, 2 red, an enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy.
Okay, so I want to talk about this first. I have been seeing people compare this card to 1,000 Year Storm, when really this is much more of a card like Swarm Intelligence. Swarm Intelligence is the same effect, except it's not restricted to only your first instant or sorcery per turn, and you must cast the copy, but basically it's the same card. And it's just a generic value copy effect, while 1,000 Year Storm is a build-around combo enabler. They are different types of cards.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this other than that, like, it's like a enchantment version of, like, I guess, 1,000 Year Storm, like you said, but I don't know, it's not that great.
Yeah, and I think the thing, too, about, like, 1,000 Year Storm is that pretty much gives your card storm, if I'm correct. So you're most likely going to be able to get like some of those cards that you cast to go off like 3 to 4 times, because it'll like copy it for the number of times that you've cast a spell before it. So it's not even like double, it's more than that.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, even though it's not as good as 1,000 Year Storm and it's more like Swarm Intelligence sees a fair amount of play in casual. It's still going to be played in casual spell slinger builds of like Calamax and Narset and Joda and Riku and Niv Mizzet, Perun, and a bunch of others.
Alright, so we've gone through the good, we've gone through the bad. So what do we think overall for Core Set 2021?
So, like, I know we just talked about this core set for almost like an hour and a half, but it's actually like pretty mellow of a set. I'm happy with it feeling mellow because all the previous sets this year have felt pretty crazy, wild, and powerful. And I know later this year we're going to get more powerful and crazy cards from the coming sets, so I'm kind of enjoying this calm. And because comparing this to last year even, the last core set 2020, we got crazy cards like Mystic Forge and Yarok and Kaikar and Golos and Veil of Summer, Villas, and Elvish Reclaimer. This one is much more calm. It's like, okay, we got a few nice cards here and there, but more or less it's a reprint focused set, which is what Commander players are always kind of demanding, reprints, so we can actually afford to play this format. So overall, I would say this is a successful set.
I think it does a good job mixing some new Planeswalker like static abilities or just new designs overall. You know, tripling damage through Fiery Emancipation or Teferi being able to use ability on each player's turn. It also does a good job with just like reprinting things like Heroic Intervention, like Grim Tutor, Ugin. Like, I think this is a solid set. It's pretty tame compared to Jumpstart, which is already starting to be spoiled, and has a lot for our format.
We'll be doing that next. Wait for it.
Yup. And then, so, this definitely, I like it. I like this because I think that it doesn't push too much cards into the format. And at the same time, it also gives newer players a chance to get, like, older toys that have crept up in price, like Ugin.
Yeah, Ugin's definitely become more affordable. Like, even right now, his pre-order price is $30, and I feel like it's gonna get to a point where Ugin might be worth $20 for a little bit, which feels awesome.
But they usually almost crawl back up, so I would recommend, I mean, I'm not an MTG finance person, but like I would recommend to people like, you know, maybe pick this up now while it's low.
Right, like, I do think it'll drop a little more, but Ugin being such a good card, yeah, he'll definitely like climb back up in price. Though, hopefully, since, you know, it's the core set, this will just be printed like a fuck ton, so it won't actually become all that expensive.
I'll just say for the record that I got Ugin around 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, for like $45, and that was quote-unquote cheap. So, don't miss this opportunity, people, while it's still being printed, and people aren't like buying 4 for Modern or Pioneer. I don't know if it's in Pioneer. Well, it is now, right?
Yeah.
In Pioneer, regardless of whether it was before.
I think it is
yeah.
in Pioneer even before this, because I think Pioneer starts with the like Khans of Tarkir block, and right after that is like the Fate, the middle one where Ugin's supposed to be in, before then it gets into Dragons of Tarkir. Anyway, what do you guys think the best new 99 card is?
I'm gonna say Mangara, because Mangara is a legendary creature, but I feel like he's going to be better as a 99 card.
I'm stuck between either the new Teferi, due to being able to phase out anyone who threatens your board and like politic a little bit, or just move, and extra turn shenanigans, or Terror of the Peak, because of the fact that I really do think that being able to play like big dragon and then just deal like 8 or like however much power the creature you play to either a creature or a player is invaluable.
I like how we're all gonna have different answers, because mine is like Teferi's Ageless Insight, because I do agree, Blake, that Mangara is a good 99 card, but I just think it's only gonna be like best potential in like mono white decks or like Boros decks.
Well, those are the decks that need it the most.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it like the best 99, because then it's only like supporting the 2 color and color combinations that need it. Whereas like Teferi's Ageless Insight could be what I would consider to be maybe the best 99 card. If you slot that in, whenever you draw a card.
We just have slightly different definitions of best. I like Mangara specifically because it's helping the colors that need it the most.
Okay. Okay, so I understand that. I am, though, really excited for that Terror of the Peaks, Derek. I agree, like, that's... I feel like Red definitely got... I think Red got the most new toys. White definitely got, you know, Mangara, which was a nice little toy. Blue got just a lot of card draw. I feel like I'm happy because, not to say like, you know, fuck green, but, or like fuck black, but like, those are two of like the better colors I think in EDH, and I don't think that they needed anything like stupid powerful to like help them out. So I feel like at least red and white, which are colors that have struggled in EDH historically, got some of the best like toys to play with.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for our Core Set 2021 set review. Thank you all so much for listening. Derek, thank you so much for coming out. It was great talking to you. The first time we've actually ever talked, so we should do this more often.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, you know. I love your guys' podcast, and I hope that you guys do many more in the future, you know. And then just to anyone who's listening, just remember to stay safe, social distance.
Yep, that is very important. We hope you're staying safe, you know, healthy, wash your hands, very important. If you want, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us at the Wizard Staff 101 on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Facebook page. And send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. We hope you had a great night. And we'll see you again soon for Jumpstart. Alright, peace.
Peace.
Bye-bye.